All right, I'm joined here today with David Fodor, the Head of Financial Services Strategy for ANZ. It's great to have you today.
Thanks for having me.
I think the first question I'd love to ask you is, where do you see, in your experience in banking over the last 5 to 10 years, where do you think it's going in the next 5 to 10 years with generative AI?
It's a really interesting point we're in now, Andrew. I think, and I hate using the word journey, but it is. From where we are today with the use cases that we see with AI and particularly Gen AI, which are predominantly at the moment all about non-customer facing use cases. So summarisation of information that's been exchanged between the customer and the enterprise, whether that be summarisation of texts in a written form or a verbal form, or other efficiency-based use cases. I think that's a really good place for particularly highly regulated customers to start. But where I see it going as the next step on the journey to end state is into customer-facing use cases that are not as impactful. When I say impactful, I mean not as high risk. Highly regulated industries such as financial services need to learn through a journey. We are on the way, though, to ultimately what I expect to be in the next, say, 5 years, an end state, which looks like virtual agents. There's no doubt we are going to virtual agents, but I think the virtual agent journey means an interim step where it's perhaps a servicing-based use case orientation, low-grade, menial type of tasks, repetitive tasks, before we get to the utopian virtual agent, which is a personal assistant for financial management or even a sales proposition. Even though people would naysay it today, but we were definitely getting to software-based agents as a financial services personal assistant. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and even if they start with simple tasks, getting into financial services production environments is incredibly challenging.
Absolutely.
You have to reach all of the identity, access control, data engineering and data security challenges around it. When we kind of frame in on that space, what are the emergent threats that kind of keep maybe you up at night or maybe even your customers up at night from progressing on that journey?
What I see at the moment is there's two dimensions to the challenge that we're facing at this still relatively early stage of progression and adoption of generative AI. One is the agentic AI agenda. And the other is a term that's been loosely coined recently, which is the shadow AI agenda. But starting with the agentic AI, we are starting to see the emergence and productionization of agents that act on behalf of other people as autonomous beings. Now, in a traditional data security construct, that's a very different use case to manage. You need to make sure that agents that are acting autonomously have been trained or arguably constrained into a paradigm where they know which data that they're actually able to access, analyze, and share. So I think that agentic AI, it's very, very topical at the moment, but there's a lot of risk around it. So it needs tight security, tight guardrails, tight control mechanisms. The other one that I think we're starting to see, and I expect it to be a big theme for 2025 and beyond, is the other dimension of shadow AI. Shadow AI, for me, as I understand it, looks like the massive proliferation of new models and processes that are employed throughout an enterprise at any point in time. And that's not so much an issue of it shouldn't happen, but it's about an awareness across the folks that are accountable for data and data security, actually understanding that those processes and new agents are actually out there doing what they're doing. So two very different dynamics, but equally as important. And when we look for data security, it's top of mind, really top of mind.
You touched something there that's really deep, I think, on CISOs' minds right now, which is around data and permission boundaries that AI agents can actually access. And the fact that that's actually a representation, or the first step on that journey is to reflect what a human can see inside of that environment. Can you delegate access?
Yeah.
Can you inherit it into an AI agent like you would trust an employee? But that requires those data and permission boundaries to be correct in the first place, and those fine-grained permissions to be set correctly on that underlying data. In your experience, this kind of comes down to the fact of data access audits inside of organizations, which is that process. I'm sure you've gone through it multiple times in your background at banks. Have you seen that be an efficient process? What are the gaps there that need to be up-leveled to help unlock this future for AI agents?
Yeah, it's a really tough challenge particularly in my experience working for a large bank. I worked for one of the large banks in Australia. And I wouldn't say anyone's doing anything deliberately wrong. I think that the outcome that we see in terms of the level of rigor around who has access to what data and when and where comes more from the sheer complexity of the environment than anything else.
Yep.
The reality is, in a large organisation like a bank, you have lots and lots of data producers, whether they're people or systems, creating and storing data in lots and lots of disparate data bunkers, stores, whatever the mechanism is, accessed by many, many, many data consumers. That combination of lots of data producers, lots of data consumers accessing data from lots of different sources just adds up to lots of complexity. And I don't think there's anything more to it than that, other than getting your head around how to control that mechanism through least privilege access as a starting point, understanding who really needs access to what data for what purpose. So at the end of the day, I think more needs to be done at the ground level to control both sides of those equations, reducing the complexity of where data is stored, but also reducing the number and level of access that the consumers have. Particularly in a new paradigm where much of the data that's needed to both train and then inference models is inclusive, not just enterprise data and customer data, but also a lot of third-party data.
Yeah.
So just, it acts as that sort of multiplier effect to increase the complexity again from there.
Yeah, and as more organizations leverage more and more tools, we've seen studies that like an average tool chain for someone to use inside of an organization is about 25 different tools. And across that, there's a number of knowledge bases. As they get older and older, we're finding when we run tests that anywhere from 5 to 10% of permissions can be misconfigured, and that's not intentionally by anyone's poor doing. It's left to the employees to set those permissions about what's appropriate. And as you inherit more and more access over time, what's appropriate on day one of your job looks very different compared to what you have access to 100 days, 2 years or 3 years into your role, especially as you have those role changes.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that something that you've seen organizations naturally try and solve for, or is this really kind of come into the headlights now with generative AI coming into place and leveraging those fine-grained permissions and data level access unlike ever before?
I think the reality is it's a very unlevel playing field.
Newer entrants to markets, and in our paradigm in financial services, the challenger banks, for example, who are working off a greenfield architecture, have had the beauty of implementing like zero trust security and fine-grained identity access management controls from day one. So they're that much further down the track. Incumbents in the market don't have that opportunity. They're working with a lot of legacy, so they have to work back from that. But I think that this explosion and the reinvention of AI with the onset of generative AI has been an opportunity for most organisations to level set what good looks like when it comes to control mechanisms for data security. So
makes a lot of sense.
I think it's top of mind for everyone.
Yeah. And back to AI and kind of its potential. I'd love to ask you about a few different teams involved in the process of implementing generative AI. And from your experience over probably the last 2 years and really at the coalface of this, what do you see as the key tenets that a security team needs to focus on when they're embarking on the first steps of their generative AI journey to actually make it successful?
I think from the security level up, if I use a bit of a stack analogy, I think it's incumbent, and they have the hardest job, it's incumbent upon those teams to deeply understand the nature of how AI and new AI, generative AI models work, how they are trained, how they consume data, how they transfer data, and then on top of just the pure understanding, developing strong and consistent mechanisms, control frameworks, guardrails, access authorities on top of that to ensure the safe use and transfer around the organisation. So they've got arguably the toughest job. They not only have to understand deeply the tech itself, but have to then put in the response mechanisms to control how they're managed in production.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think for the last kind of pillar of AI enablement comes to that business owner or that business leader that's running the initiative. Maybe they're not as deeply skilled in security or engineering, but they've seen the vision and the opportunity for their organization to enable this technology. What should they keep kind of front of mind?
It's really easy. It's simply value creation.
Yep.
It's as easy as that. I think we've seen over the last 2 years a lot of investment in kicking tires, learning, giving things a go. Now we're really at the point in time where monetization is key. You know, building teams, building constructs to train models and not prioritise, but make them more proprietary to their organisation is a big investment. And now it's time to pick the right use cases that have meaningful outcomes for your organisation and particularly for the customers of your organisation, and making sure that when you've got success, success is known so that you can earn the right to reinvest in that next phase of evolution.
Yeah, and kind of as we finally sum up here, I think there's a feeling that data security at that lowest level, be that a sentence level, an image, or a chunk of information that an AI system can retrieve, is becoming more and more in the focus of not only executives, security teams, engineering teams, etc.
Yeah.
Is this kind of calling on a bit of a seismic shift in how data security should be viewed and acted upon, or the jobs to be done around data security inside of large enterprises going forward?
I think the short answer, Andrew, for me is yes. It's a pretty easy thing to say. What I see, and I've been in and out of the AI field for the last 25 years of my career, and I spent a lot of time in traditional, regression-based model development back when I was in banking. So AI itself is not new, and the data requirements that go around that are not new, but they're very different now. In a traditional model, the data that was used for training and then inference was predominantly internal data, or it had been internalized. It had been depersonalized, brought in to use to train the model, and it was well controlled. The paradigm that we're in now is completely different. There is so much third-party data and data transfer in and out of enterprises now that it makes the data security requirements exponentially higher. So it's got to be one of the very first things you look at when you're leaping into a new project, exploiting a new opportunity and prosecuting any new use cases. It's right up the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're finding as well is like DLP just isn't enough for enterprise customers anymore. It's like DLP and what else is allowing you that deep magnification into what's appropriate for employees and then what's appropriate to provide to AI systems as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having it.
Thanks.